Okay, this chapter is over tissues. And so we're going to look at how different cells are put together to make different tissue and their functions and structures. We'll look at epithelial tissues today. And tomorrow we're going to look at connective tissue. And the last part of the chapter is muscle and nerves.
So is this the hard one that everyone's talking about?
No. That will probably be till January.
What's that? Yeah, everyone says that muscles and the hard those whenever they have a Oh, fun. Go do what's
Yeah. There's, you have like, yeah. 1, 2.
Where did you get this? You subscriber?
There's like 6 quizzes that you take over them. So tissues in histology. We've kind of talked about histology. Sign it and everything? Okay. Tissues are classified based on their structure, and then also their extracellular matrix, so what's outside of the cell, what's present outside of the cell, and also their functions. So we have epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue that we're going to look at. Some different ways they study tissues is by biopsy, removal of tissues for diagnostic purposes. You usually hear that when they're looking at studying a tissue to see whether it's cancerous, but that biopsy, but you can look at it for other reasons also. Then autopsy is when you look at the organs looking for the cause of death. It's like the coroner or on CSI when you see the guy in the morgue. That would be an autopsy. Oh. So epithelial tissues, they consist mostly entirely of cells, so there's not a lot of extracellular fluid or matrix outside of the cell. It covers all the body's surfaces and forms glands. So it lines the outside surface of the body, lining of the digestive, respiratory, and urogenital systems, heart and blood vessels, linings of many cavities. So anything that is open and is not attached to anything else, like if you have a hollow cavity or a hollow organ, that is lined with epithelial tissue, and their skin outside of the body is epithelial tissue. It has a free surface, which means it's not in contact with any other cells, like your skin outside is free. It's not in contact. It's not attached to anything else. Then it has a basement membrane, which is at the underneath the epithelial tissue, which connects it to the connective tissue below. And there's no blood vessels. The blood vessels are all in the connective tissue and basement membrane, and so all the nutrients and waste of the cell have to diffuse across the cell to either get it or to get rid of it in the blood. All of your organs. All of your organs have this kind of tissue. So functions of epithelial tissues, they protect underlying structures like the epithelium lining in your mouth. There's protecting the structures underneath that. Act as barriers like your skin, as long as your skin isn't broken. It's protecting against the microorganisms or debris. It permits the passage of substances like oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange in lungs. Those gases have to diffuse through the epithelium to get to the blood vessels below. The secreting substances like sweat glands and mucus glands. And then they also absorb substances such as in the lining of the small intestine. Yep.
So are we absorbing oxygen from our skin too?
No. I would. No. Frogs do that. I know. But no, I don't think we do at all. So how we classify the epithelium is based on the number of layer of cells and the shape of the cells. So we combine these two together to get the names of the epithelium. But if we have a simple epithelium, that means we have just one layer of cells. They extend from the basement membrane to the free surface. So the one cell is in contact with the basement membrane and is exposed at the free surface. If it's stratified, there's more than one layer. And so the shape of the cell is used to name the tissue also. This includes the transitional epithelium, where the cells can change shape depending on distension of the organ. So if an organ becomes larger, it's able to change shape to compensate for that. And as it gets smaller, they change shape again to compensate for that. You think of an organ that would do that you would need transitional epithelium. Your heart doesn't get as large as what it needs to be, like the stomach, because then it's empty. Lungs a little bit, they don't get as big as that. You don't need that as much. There's one other one. What gets full and you empty it? The bladder is a good one where it gets large. It's automatic. It's on a timer. And it's motion sensor. Then the pseudostratified is where, if you look at it, initially it looks stratified, but it's actually not. If you look closer, the cells go from the basement membrane to the free surface. It's called pseudostratified. Do you know what the prefix pseudo means? False. It means false. So it's false stratified. It's pseudostratified. It looks stratified, but it's really not. Pseudo.
What's up with the P then? Like psychology.
Yeah. Which one? What term? Pseudonym? I'm not familiar with. Synonym?
It should be psychology.
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask Mrs. Marker and let me know. Then the shape of the cells, if it's squamous, it's flat and scale-like. Cuboidal, the cells are equal in height and width. And then columnar, they're taller than wide. So we put these two together so we'd have like simple squamous. What kind of tissue would that, what would it look like? One layer of flat cells, right? Or a stratified cuboidal has more than one layer, but they're about equal in height and width. So. And how they, what their structure is like is what determines what their function is. And so simple epithelium usually allow for diffusion of gases because it's really thin. The gases don't have to diffuse across much tissue. Also for filtration of blood, secretion, absorption. If it's stratified, it's usually for protection, particularly against abrasion, like your skin. If you rub up against something, skin cells slough off. That's protecting your underlying structures. And then squamous, since they are flat and thin, they're usually easy to diffuse gases or nutrients or waste across them. And then cuboidal or columnar are usually for the secretion or absorption. And the columnar cells, a columnar epithelium may include goblet cells. And goblet cells are what produce the mucus. They will excrete mucus. So here's a picture of simple squamous epithelium. We said the structure, just from the name, you can tell it's a single layer of flat cells. It's for diffusion of gases and nutrients. And so you can find this a lot in the lining of blood and lymphatic vessels so that oxygen gases can diffuse across very easily in nutrients. Some of the small ducts, the alveoli and the lungs, which is where gas exchange occurs. And the inner surface of the eardrum. So this is a picture. Now this is the actual, what you would see in a microscope. So you can see it, I mean, it doesn't look exactly like a picture, but here is your single layer So it's simple squamous. Simple cuboidal, you have one layer of a cube-like cell. So this is located in the kidney tubules, some of the glands, the lining of terminal bronchioles in the lungs. And these cells can have cilia associated with them, and the cilia is what moves the mucus up the bronchioles and up your respiratory tract. It can carry out facilitated diffusion, active transport, secretion, absorption in the kidney, and then we talked about the ciliated cells. So here, this right in the middle here must be a cavity, because this is lining a cavity, so maybe it's like a vessel or something, where this is our simple cuboidal epithelium on both sides, and then this is a cavity. It's a hollow cavity. Simple columnar has a single layer of tall, narrow cells. These can also be ciliated or have microvilli on it. And remember, the microvilli increases the surface area in order to allow for more absorption of nutrients in your small intestine, so that's a location of them. Gallbladder, bile ducts, so several different areas. And if it has cilia, again, it's going to move mucus, move particles out of the bronchioles. It can also secrete mucus, so sometimes there's goblet cells associated with it, or absorbing by the intestine. So here, this whole layer right here is our simple columnar epithelium. You can see what it looks like. It's a lot thicker there. I would say these big red things, actually, yep. These big red things are goblet cells, so that's what's going to produce the mucus. It opens to the outside, to the cavity. Yep.
So if those were on the small intestine, those have like
Yeah, like on this surface right here. But they're so small, you wouldn't be able to see them unless you were even magnified even more. Then stratified squamous, you have several layers of the flat cells. And so there's moist stratified squamous and keratinized stratified squamous. The moist is in the mouth, throat, larynx, esophagus. So, and it's considered moist because it's either covered with mucus or some sort of like saliva or something. And keratinized is in your skin. If it's keratinized, that cell is actually dead, and the inside has been filled with keratin, which is a protein, and that hardens it. So your skin is filled with, the outer cells are filled with keratin, makes it a lot more protective as a protective barrier. So the bottom in your skin, when it's closer to the basement membrane, those cells are actually living and dividing and multiplying. As it divides, it moves more cells upwards, and then that skin cells slough off the top, and that's just normal. I mean, you lose skin cells all the time normally. I can't remember how much you lose, but I know like if you buy a new mattress after several years, if you reweigh it, you gain pounds of skin cells in your mattress. Mm-hmm. Over a lifetime of mattress, it can gain a lot of weight. Which is why bed bugs love the mattress, because they eat that dead skin cells. That's what they eat. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or your pillow. So it functions against abrasion, water loss, infection. Stratified cuboidal, you have multiple layers of somewhat cube shape. Here you can see that there's two layers. You can see nuclei on top and on bottom. When you look under a microscope, it's not like you see actual cubes. Okay, you're looking at a cube-like. So they aren't really flat in this picture. So you know they're not flat. They're not really tall. So they're cube. not columnar or squamous. These will line a lot of glands, and so they are involved in secretion, absorption, and protection. And stratified columnar. Stratified columnar, if you look at the bottom layers, they look a lot like cubes, but as you go towards the top, they get longer, so they are considered columnar. A lot of times you'll have goblet cells in these also. And so here you can see these are a little shorter, but then as you get to the top, those are a lot taller, more column-like. So this is the basement membrane. You can see it right here. So from here to the free surface is the epithelium. These would be connective tissues of some sort. And then pseudostratified columnar. It's in the lining of the nasal cavity. A lot of times will be, well, this is almost always, it'll be ciliated and associated with goblet cells. So if you look at this picture, the drawing, it looks like it's stratified because not all these cells look like it's going to the free surface. But if you were to look at an individual cell, it might be going behind a little bit. It might be really thick towards the top and really thin on the bottom, so it gets kind of smushed by the other ones, but it's actually reaching from the basement membrane all the way to the top. Like this one right here, you can see goes from the basement membrane to the free surface. So it is pseudostratified. All these blue things, those are goblet cells that are associated with it. There. And then transitional epithelium lines the urinary bladder. It is stratified, and the cells will change shape. So when it's not distended, so like when your bladder is empty, they look more cube-like. When the bladder is full, when it's distended, it looks more like squamous, flat. And also the bladder and whatever, if it needs it might have folds in it, so you might have folds because then it has even more room to expand when it needs to. This is a table just summarizing them. If it's from your book, you can look at that. So there's some cell surface modifications. We've already talked about most of these where you have microvilli. They're called brush border, but those are at your small intestine. They increase the surface area for absorption or secretion. And then cilia move those materials across the cell surface, like in your respiratory tract, moving the mucus up the respiratory tract. And then the cell surfaces, they can have those microvilli, or it can be smooth, which a lot of times is there. It's reduced friction. It can have folds, and like in your stomach, those folds are called rugae, but there's so that allows that organ, whatever it is, to fill and expand a lot more. And it is also transitional epithelium. And then the goblet cells open to the cell surface, and those are the mucus-producing cells. We'll talk about those. Oh. And then cell connections. Since there are no blood vessels, the cells have to diffuse and communicate with each other just by being side by side, and they are called junctions a lot of times. The functions are to form a permeability layer so that any nutrients or gases can diffuse right through both cells from inside one cell to another, or they communicate with each other with chemicals. These cell connections can also bind cells together, and they allows for intercellular communication. So there's types. The desmosomes are that green one on the left, and it's a mechanical link allowing for communication between the two cells. Tight junctions bind adjacent cells together, holds them together. Those are those light blue, grayish colored ones. And then the gap junctions have small channels They go from inside one cell to another, and then the ions or whatever can just pass from one cell to another easily. Yeah.
So when they say like intercellular communication, so just talks within a cell, like it doesn't talk to other cells, what does that say?
Intercellular is between two cells. Intracellular would be within the cell. So you're talking from one cell to another. The other one that's in this picture that's not in this list is the hemidesmosome. It's just half because it's not connecting to another cell. It's connecting it to the basement membrane here. It connects the cell to the basement membrane. And the last thing today is glands. Glands are made up of epithelium with a supporting network of connective tissue. And there's two different types. There's endocrine and exocrine. Endocrine have no ducts, and so it doesn't open to a free surface. It empties its contents into either, a lot of times, the bloodstream or in the extracellular fluid and matrix. Most of your hormones are produced this way, so it gets put into your bloodstream. Exocrine open to the free surface through ducts, like your sweat glands and oil glands. They are considered exocrine glands. Exocrine glands are classified by their structure. So we have unicellular, like goblet cells, and then multicellular. And multicellular glands have lots of different shapes. And so we have simple ducts. They have very few branches, like that top row is a simple exocrine glands. Compound have ducts with many branches, and so those bottom three are compound exocrine glands. And if the ducts end in tubules, they're called tubular. So this one right here, they have two branches. They're called tubular. Where if the ducts end in simple sacs, they're called alveoli. And these are like in the lungs. They look like clusters of grapes. They have little sacs at the ends, and they're alveoli here. So simple, compound. You guys have any questions? Any other questions?
So is this tissue part of the organ itself?
Yeah, it would be considered part of the organ.